An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? If someone could just give me a shout out in the comments and let me know that you can hear me, that would be great. Tonight, I'm gonna interact a lot more with the chat than I usually do. I think I'm going to talk about inspiration in comics because I ran across something. If you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen it, with new comics that are coming out. And let me see. Oh, let's see. Yes, everybody can hear me loud and clear. Great. But I saw some beautiful covers for some new comics, but they were just so dark. And I said on Twitter, this is all they can give us right now is darkness. Even if they're trying to revamp and to give the audience what they want, they still can't do anything but darkness. And that's it. That's all they got. But that's what I want to talk about tonight. Let's see who's here first. Let's see that Jewel is here from the very first. Manny is here. Vaz is here. Pedro is here. Going to fall asleep to the stream, he says. Let's see. Tony is here. Got a lot of talk about how cold it is, which, yeah, it's wicked cold. Let's see who else is here. Gotta scroll down. Michael is here. Zach Tan, I think, is watching here and John's Long Box at the same time. That's why I'm late. Sorry, about 5 minutes late. John and I were over at John's Long Box doing comic book team up, and we just got caught up in the books that he's reading. Let's see. Alpha Red Comics. How you doing? I don't think I've seen you before in the chat, Alpha Red. Nice to see you here. Alpha Red, that's a great comic name. Honestly, that's a great comic book character name or team name. Alpha Red. That I like that. Let's see. Manny is here. Ryan is here. Let's see. Calliope is here. Ryan has a question already. Ryan says, RJ, which superhero has the best way of traveling? Iceman slides on ice. Spider-Man swings on a web. He-Man rides Battle Cat. Optimus Prime becomes a semi-truck. Quite honestly, for myself, if I ever, I talked to John about this a couple of times. If I thought to myself, what actual superhero power would I want the most? It would be teleportation, and not, disappearing teleportation like, I don't know, Nightcrawler or something like that. I mean, Magic, that kind of teleportation where you can create a hole, basically a wormhole, and walk through it. That would be my, I think I could do so much with that power. That would be the best power in the world. And to me, that would be the best form of travel, right? I don't need to travel anywhere. I just need to walk through my own door, and here we go. I'm in the place where I am. So that would be the best form of travel. But if you're asking about what kind of travel, for anything else than that, that's hard to say. Quite honestly, my mind goes to the absurd and goes back to Spider-Man and his dune buggy. There you go. Right? A lot of people don't know that Spider-Man didn't always swing through New York via his webs. He had a dune buggy that could actually stick to walls, and then he could drive all over the place. That was the 1970s for you. There you go. Best form of travel for a comic book character. half joking, and it was ridiculous, but at the same time, sounds like fun. Let's see. Let's see. Um, let's see. Zach Dan says, yes, talking about the darkness of the comics that are out there, which is what I want to talk about tonight. Calliope says, Princess Amethyst rides a winged horse. Okay. I remember Princess Amethyst, but I don't remember the winged horse. So anyway, I'll try to keep up with the chat as it goes by, but I tend to, when I go on, close my eyes. So I apologize if I miss your comment. I'll try to get back to them. If anybody is new here, ask me any questions that you want. I will get to them before the end of the stream. What I usually do is talk a little bit about my subject, and then we'll just go through the chat and answer everybody's questions. If you have any questions about anything, any of my videos on Saturdays, or any other videos that I've done about my books, about what we're talking about tonight, just put it in the chat. Give me, at the very least, a question mark, if not tagging me in it, so I know that the question is for me, and I will try to get to them. If anybody does not know, again, there are 2 links in the description for my 3 graphic novels. I have 2 superhero graphic novels and 1 low fantasy. The low fantasy, we played the trailer for the first trailer for it at the first of this stream, which is Crom the Destroyer. We're still trying to get that out. And I am going to start getting out Fate Blue, which is what you see behind me right now on the screen. This is one of the panels from Fate Blue. It is a film noir passion project of mine, and it's about, basically, you take film noir and you throw in a dash of Indiana Jones because it's set in the 1930s. So you get some weird goings on. I suppose if you want to think of it in terms of a character that might be similar to you, it's kind of like Hellblazer, but not so much the magic end of it, more the mysterious end of it in that form. Anyways, so what I wanted to talk about today, just for the few minutes that I wanted to talk, because like I said, I want to get to the chat, was the fact that, yeah, darkness is all that modern comics can give us. And that's part of the reason why I would like to go back to 80s comics rather than 90s comics. Now, I have a lot of people that are doing indie comics, and they want to go back to the 90s, extreme image style. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'd rather go back to the 80s. Now, there's nothing particularly wrong with the style of the 90s, but the 80s was a lot, especially the early 80s, between 80 and 85, they were a lot more fun, to say the least. I mentioned this a couple of times, I think, on my stream, but there's an early 80s Captain America that was done by Mike Zeck, and it was one of the first videos that I did on my channel, was to just go through that book and laugh and laugh and laugh at it. I mean, it's Mike Zeck art, so it's extraordinarily beautiful. The entire, he does the cover and the internals. But I can't remember who does the actual story for it off the top of my head. If you're looking through the covers and wondering which one it is, it's got a cast of characters surrounded by basically a robot head with a brain inside it. I can't remember. Anyways, Captain America goes forward into the time of Deathlock, and it's just absurd. It's just crazy absurd, and it's actually pretty sane and has continuity as compared with the DC comics at the time. But they were fun. And I mean, like I said, I did an entire video. It was probably, I don't know, 15 minutes were my videos back then. But I just sat there and laughed at it and laughed and laughed. And to me, at the time, I didn't laugh and laugh when I was reading it. I thought, because I was a kid, I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. But now I laugh at it. But still, at the same time, I can read it when I was a kid and have fun, and I can read it while as an adult and I can have fun. And that's the kind of thing we need. Quite honestly, that's the kind of thing we need. We don't need this darkness. And here I am showing you black and white and saying that it's film noir, my new book coming out. But at the very least, it's not film noir in a strict sense. I give it that moniker because if you think about true film noir, there's not supposed to be any kind of supernatural in it whatsoever, and that's the exact opposite of what I present, because there is a lot of darkness to this world. Well, he's in the Depression, so you're going to have darkness in it, and there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. But at the same time, he's a man who is struggling to survive and find not just happiness. I don't think he's even at the point of trying to find happiness. He's trying to find a reason to survive. He keeps on moving. He won't stop because he is just that kind of man that just, I can't give up. I just can't. But he still needs a reason. He still needs to find a reason, because his reason for living pretty much gets destroyed within the first, I think, 8 pages of the first book. So, here I am again talking about darkness and why things should be lighter, and then I'm putting out a book that's almost film noir. But at the same time, it doesn't have the darkness to it that is going to be shown in modern comics, or let's say current comics right now, wherein everything is gray, including morality. That kind of darkness is just a soul killer. Whereas with my book, although it is black and white with a little bit of blue thrown in there, and again, you're in the Depression, you're following a guy who's lost everything that he could ever want, and he starts off the happiest man in the world, and he loses everything. But at the same time, he doesn't lose his sense of right and wrong. He never loses that sense of right and wrong. He never loses that sense of, I have to go on. And that's the kind of positivity that we need at the baseline, at the absolute baseline. Right and wrong, keep on going, because there is a reason to keep on going. Whereas if you get into something like I'm going to be doing for the backup story for Thomas Valiant #2, we're going to be doing, I got Don Chin to write that. Don Chin does parody comics most of the time. He said this is the first script he actually wrote for anyone else by himself, because he's been doing comics since, the mid 1980s. But yeah, it's very much a fun, tongue-in-cheek take on Thomas Valiant, because it goes back into his past, wherein the stories right now are set in present day. He's been around for quite some time, so we're going back to the late 80s within that story, and talking about Thomas Valiant, or showing you Thomas Valiant as he was when he was basically a kid. I don't want to put that in quotation marks, because he has a lot of different stages in his life, but it's tongue-in-cheek in the fact that it's fun. I like to put a lot of drama in my books, but at the same time, that drama is never overwhelming, even though you get death. And death for my comics is you're dead, you're dead. So sorry to everybody who wants the ostrich to come back, but no, dead is dead. The thing is that, again, the baseline is heroism. The baseline is virtue. The baseline is that everybody is trying their best, even though their foot slip, and their some people are actually pretty terrible at trying to be heroes, and they turn out to be villains when they're trying to be heroes. At the very least, there's a clear and distinct notion of right and wrong for the world, if not for the people in the world. And that's the difference when you're looking at modern current comics, whereas that grayness of morality is what is the backdrop of everything that they're going to do. And it affects the tone of the book, and it affects the tone of how a reader interacts with the book. Certainly for me, anyways, as a reader, I'm reading it going, I don't care. You're making me feel worse about my situation where I am right now. Why would you want to do that? Now, I think I understand why the people who make modern current comics do that, is because they don't believe in anything but gray morality. They don't believe in anything that is going to be inspirational. And, I don't know, but it makes me think of that Simpsons episode where basically the entire town gets captured by a cult, and they're wondering why Homer is not being broken down by the cult, and because they're just feeding them slop, and the slop is supposed to be a low protein gruel in order to sap your will, in order to make sure that you're primed for mental abuse and brainwashing. And that's the way cults work. And that's the way the cult of your quote unquote progressives work in our society. They want to break down your reliance on beauty, your reliance on ideas of right and wrong, your reliance on inspirational characters, or anything that's going to inspire you. That's why they can't write anything. Even now, they're moving away to try to, once again, at the very least, sell some kind of comics. They're trying to get back to things that will sell, but they still don't understand the importance of inspiration. They still don't understand the importance of superheroes, and the fact that heroes in our society for 3,000 years were paragons of virtue. Those virtues are positive things. There is a distinct line of right and wrong when you look at the virtues. There's virtues and vice. That's why villains are villains. They are vicious. That is full of vice, which is the opposite of virtue. And this is the notion that they cannot grasp within writing modern comics. Now, maybe there are artists out there that can grasp it, pencilers or inkers and people like that. Maybe they should be writing the comics, but the people who are writing the comics, and they pretty much have a lock on who they're going to let in, they don't understand the basic concept of heroism, the basic concept of the fact that these characters are there to inspire and make your audience feel good, not to inform them about things, not to, I don't know, preach to them or propagandize them or anything else of the kind. It is to inspire. And if you're looking at the cover of the Superman, which is the cover that I put on the thumbnail for this video, that's inspirational. That's why I tweeted it out today. The first thing I ran across when I was going, through my feed was the covers for the dark DC characters, the alternative dark DC characters that they're putting out right now. And I thought that is just, the art is nice, but that's just so soul-suckingly numbing that why would I want to buy it? And then I ran across, the very first comic that I wanted to post today, and it was that picture of Superman with the eagle landing on his let's see, I'm going to put it up in the background. Let's see. If you're looking at fade to blue, give me 1 second here. I have to add the background and excuse me, find the file within my folders, which are so full, by the way. My actual computer is so immensely full of things right now that I can barely operate my computer correctly because I have so many files. No, that's not the right one. Anyways, I'll get it up in the background, but it's Superman, and it's Superman being inspirational. And that's the kind of Superman that we need. That's the kind of comics that we need. And I think that Marvel can do that just as well as DC. Marvel does it in a different way. Here we go. And even though Marvel does it in a different way, it's still inspirational. I still gained inspiration from, Peter Parker, even though he's much darker than Superman, because Marvel, as it was supposed to create, Spider-Man as their version of Superman. But the darkness that has creeped in since the 90s, again, the darkness in the 90s, sure, it was there, but it was there as a play off of the light that was also there at the same time. Whereas today, all you get is darkness. And, that really irks me, to say the very least, enough so that I wanted to make it a 15-minute rant on our making comics fun again. That's the thing. We want comics to be fun, because why in the world would I pick up a soul-sucking book and read it? It makes zero sense. I want to read something that's going to make me feel better, going to make me feel inspired at best. Better is good. Make me feel like I've been entertained is good. Inspirational is what you're shooting for. That's the moon. Anyways, I'm going to go through the chat and see what everybody is saying. I'll try to get back to where I was before. Give me 1 second here. Excuse me. I just had to clear my throat really quickly. Michael says, let's see. Remember when Aquaman had to wear a fishbowl full of water whenever he was on land? That is why people didn't take him seriously, even though he was insanely strong. I do not remember, honestly, Michael, that far back. I don't ever remember Aquaman doing that, but I do remember Aquaman being ridiculous. And that's the thing. Ridiculous characters, when you look at them today, is something that, I think I skipped a whole bunch of the chat, so I'll have to go back. But excuse me. I think that today is what you need, right? Even ridiculous characters would be better than the characters that you have today. And I think at the same time, looking at how DC created characters within the 70s and why Marvel took off the way it was because DC was creating ridiculous characters. And I think that ridiculous characters of the late 60s and early 70s was because of the tough time that the world was having at that time, and they wanted to put out something fun for their audience. They were playing off what their audience needed in their lives. That's one of the things that they should that any storyteller should always do. Look at your society and sure, tell a timeless story, but you got to pay attention to what your audience is craving. And at that time, they crave something not just fun, but escapist fun. And that's what they were given. So that's why they were like that. All right, scrolling down, George says Spider-Man had a Doom buggy. No wonder he was always broke. The payments for a vehicle like that could stick to walls has to be astronomical. I don't even remember where he got the stupid thing, but yes, it was the 70s again. Everybody had a Doom buggy back then. Let's see. Scrolling down, Vaz says, I think darkness in comics is most likely laziness or short time to produce the final product. Could be. Laziness could certainly be part of it. Again, laziness is part of darkness in your life, quite honestly, if you ask me. Be economical with your time, and thrifty doesn't mean you have to be, I don't know, Ebenezer Scrooge. You can still be a whirlwind of activity and the opposite of lazy, and be fun with what you're doing, and have fun with what you're doing. Let's see. Calliope says, Princess Amethyst rides her winged horse on the cover of issue number 37. I did not know that. I'll have to check that out. I don't have very many of those. I do have some, but not a whole lot. Scrolling down to Zach Dan, he says, I don't subscribe to Eastern mysticism, but stories generally need balance. Darker settings need some light, and lighter settings need a hint of darkness for there to be both conflict and meaning. Agreed. And somebody, I don't remember who it was on Twitter, made that exact comment as well. I think Zach Tan, or a similar one to exactly what you're saying. It's that the balance of the darkness and the light needs to be there. That's why your villains are there. The villains are there for the darkness. Your heroes are not there for the darkness. Your heroes are not there for grayness. But again, go back to some of my videos where Marvel was talking 5 years ago to who they said was the great new comic writers for Marvel. And they're all talking about how they wanted to write villains instead of heroes because they were so much more nuanced, and heroes were in a box and had to, live in this box. And of course, that box was morality. They never said it out loud, but that's what they were thinking. That's what they were saying. You could tell from all the things that they were going on about, and that's where darkness comes from. I'm sorry for people who, I truly am, and I mean that. I am sorry for people who believe that morality is a gray. You must have an awful life, to be quite honest. It must be so, again, mind-numbing to not see the beauty of how right and wrong actually plays out in the universe. Let's see. That also says, I still think of Deodato Jr. when he did this. It was really nice art. Nowadays, it's all in shadow. Yeah. Okay. That's one of the other points I didn't even think to bring up, Vaz. But yeah, the fact that you have what I call mud colors within modern comic books, which is a female color palette, because female eyes can pick up more colors than male eyes can. But if you look at this Superman in the background, right? This is inspirational for a number of reasons, and the colors is definitely one of them. Bright, bold colors. That's one of the things I miss so much about comics, is the bright colors, the color palette of the 1980s. It was in itself a backdrop of inspiration, just because of its cleanness. Let's see. Scrolling down, Zach Dan says, the church is beautiful. At least I think there is light coming through the window. Yeah, the picture from Fade to Blue. That's actually for my artist. The character is in New York at the time, so that's St. Patrick's in New York. Let's see. I gave him a picture of St. Patrick's, and the artist just went to town on it. He took the entire thing and recreated it. It's the main entrance to St. Patrick's. Let's see. Scrolling down. Zach Dan also says, they mistake subjective morality with nuance. Yeah. Oh, beautifully put, Zach Dan. Let's see. Manny is here, and Manny says, RJ, I finally read your first comic, Thomas Valiant, and I enjoyed reading it. I do want to ask, though, how does stealing a statue of the hero team show that the team Thomas Valiant put together are heroes? It doesn't. That's the whole point. This is an origin story that for Thomas Valiant. Again, he wants to he was of that world before. He was of that world where they thought they were heroes, but they weren't acting in a heroic way. He wants to try to make himself a hero, and he's still stuck in the mindset of, this is how I become a hero. I show off, and he tries to show off, and it costs him dearly. And in costing him dearly, that's the pathos that he goes through in those last final pages to finally realize what you need to do to be a hero, and which is to be self-sacrificial. That it's an origin story, so that's the whole point. The self-sacrifice comes out at the end, just like you would get in Spider-Man, where Uncle Ben dies in his arms. That's the end of the story, and he wasn't a hero until that point. And he realizes he wasn't a hero until that point, even though he had superpowers. And that's really the point of Thomas Valiant #1. Let's see, scrolling down. Vaz says Batman should be in darkness. Batman should be in darkness. The thing is, they are trying to do that darkness in a lot of other books that shouldn't be like that. Well, I always think of Batman as the light in the darkness. Not a lot of people today think of it in that way, but originally I can't remember the writer. I was reading an interview with a writer for Batman, and that's what he said about it. And I said to myself, exactly. And this is an older, I can't remember, it could have been Denny O'Neil, but so an older writer for Batman, basically saying, yes, Batman is dark, but he is the light in the darkness. He operates in the dark, but he is the light in the darkness. Let's see, scrolling down. Guys also says, didn't they also have a series called Batman City of Light in early 2000s? I don't remember. With a Gotham Without Darkness. I was not too active in picking up comics in the early 2000s, so I would not know Vaz. Let's see. Jewel has an interesting comment, says, I don't think Batman should be in darkness. I think he should be in blue. Yes, I agree. To me, anyways, the Jim Aparo Batman is the one that sticks out in my mind. He's in gray, not in blue, really. It's a gray and a blue. Let's see. Scrolling down to George, he says, there is darkness, and then there is darkness, and then there is, I can't see anything. Look at the difference between the Battle of the Two Towers and the Battle of Winterfell. Both take place at night. One you can see and one you can't. Okay, there you go. The difference, I think Tolkien himself was very invested in the ideas of shadow and light, and that's really the basis of, if not the entire story, the most of the story that he talks about, or he gives to you in The Hobbit and the Two Towers, or the rest of his novels. But yeah, it's shadow and light, darkness and light. And he was writing those books for his kids, to give them a picture of light in a time of darkness. Let's see. Excuse me for 1 second. Excuse me. I had to clear my throat. I apologize. Vaz says, I couldn't stand the Superman done by Jim Lee. It was so a red-skinned Batman that I stopped after 2 issues. Okay. A reskinned Batman. Okay. Yeah. I don't think I can picture in my mind the Jim Lee Superman off the top of my head, but I don't think Jim Lee would be a match for Superman, not as a writer or as an artist, although I do love his art. Let's see. Vaz says Superman is the light that series showed him in darkness. Okay, but see, that's why, to me anyways, the main villain for Superman should be Darkseid, not Doomsday, right? But even then, Superman is the light. His major villains are Darkseid and Doomsday, right? He's the light as compared to that. Let's see. Zach Den says, besides being based on truth, which is important, don't get me wrong, but how would you explain the difference between inspiring and informing preaching that progressives do? Well, the difference is reality, quite honestly. As I've been saying in the last little while in my videos, and I think I said probably a month or 2 ago, I have people in the comments always trying to bring it down to reality, the difference between an is and an ought. They go back to Hegel or Kant and say, you can't get an ought, you ought to do something from what is. And they basically ignore the entire canon of natural law, which has been, written since the time of the ancient Greeks. You definitely can. You most definitely can. Why? Because we're dealing with human beings, and human beings they have their existence encompasses an ought, because human beings are not fully formed when they come into this world, and you must create yourself by your choices, virtuous or villainous, into what you're going to be. And that journey of what you're going to be is part of the human life, and it is where you ought to go, right? If you're doing what you can in your life and reality is confirming it, that this is how you become fulfilled, then yeah, there is an ought there, which is to say you can tell the difference between what is right and wrong, and what is not just good for you and utilitarian good in a sense, but right and wrong. You can get that from reality, and that's the whole point of the preaching that you get today from your quote unquote progressive people. It doesn't align with it doesn't align with any kind of morality, because it doesn't align with reality itself. They're making these things up in order to gain power, and that's really the only thing that they care about. And if they gotta try and deny reality at every turn, then that's what they're going to do. So that's the difference. Inspiring and being someone who follows you is virtue, is a thing that exists in as an objective thing within reality. So there's your difference. You follow what is true or what is made up, what is light or what is darkness. Because you go back to, like, don't want to get too far into it, but you go back to like theological principles, like Christian theological principles. There is no two sides of a coin. There's only light. There's light and trying to flee away from the light. And that's where darkness is. You're trying to flee away from the light. It's not like there's two poles of one light and one darkness. There's only the light. That is the only actual principle. And the fleeing away from the light, the turning your back on the light, is what evil is. So yeah, they're just turning their backs on actual principles and actual reality. Let's see, scrolling down. There's a lot of crosstalk. I'll see if I can get to anything that is for me. Let's see. Oh, Calliope has a question. It says, RJ, if you were to hypothetically play Marvel Rivals, which one of the characters would you choose? I think there are 36 characters now. If you've been following my videos, you'll know that YouTube, for some reason, just keeps on pushing Asmongold onto me. And I watch way too much YouTube to begin with. But he reacted to Marvel Rivals, and basically they were roasting the character of Wolverine, and then some guy came in and played Wolverine, and he just destroyed everybody. Nobody could stop him. He was a tank, and he destroyed everybody he would come in contact with. So I'd probably play Wolverine. Scrolling down. Zach Dan says, C.S. Lewis said something similar about writing timeless stories for the times. He said something to that effect, that his audience had enough of Saturn that they needed some Jove. There you go. Yeah, well, C.S. Lewis would be a contemporary of and friend to J.R.R. Tolkien at the same time. They were both trying to write a mythology, as it were, for England, because neither of them saw a real true mythology for England, because, of course, they saw it as a separate society than the Celts, and a separate society from the Norse, although really it's just a combination of the two. But yeah, that's what they were trying to do. And within that mythology, they were trying to, at the very least, weave in, if not make the very backdrop of it, the ideas of right and wrong and light and darkness. Let's see. DFLS Studios says, what are my thoughts on Marvel Rivals? I was actually thinking about doing a video on it, but I thought, I might in the future, but I said probably not. Why? Because I don't know. I might do a video on an aspect of it. It's sad, but at the same time, it's a good thing. It's a good thing in that it's showing these characters in a positive light. And that's because there's very little storytelling being done by the people who create or at the very least control the characters, or own the characters, I should say. And there's also very little storytelling being told by the developers of the game itself. It's pretty much just you and the people who are playing the characters that are going to make up the story as you go. But it's sad in the fact that this is why there will never be any good Marvel comics ever again, is because this is where the main money for using these characters is going to come from. It's things like movies, it's things like video games. They don't care about the comics anymore. They're not the main moneymaker, they're not the main storyteller, and comics are just an afterthought. And so, you know, you want good comics, you're going to have to, unfortunately, go other places than Marvel or DC. So yeah, there's a good thing and a bad thing to it. At the very least, you get to see versions of these characters in a purer form than what you're going to get within the comics today, which is a distasteful thing for me to say, but it's the truth. DFLS also says, according to Jester Bell, it's outside the MCU and faithful to the comics. It shows men as masculine and women as feminine. Yeah, it does. I've been following a little bit of what's going on with Malice and all that kind of stuff with the Fantastic Four. I don't think you can get away from it really at this point. He continues and says, and it's reviving the Marvel fan base and helping grow interest in Fantastic Four more so than the current MCU casting in comics. Yeah, they are. I agree. That is a good part of it. But again, it also means that I don't think that's going to translate into comic sales. I wish they could figure out a way to translate it into comic sales, but I really don't think it is going to be that. It really isn't. Let's see. Scrolling down. There's a lot of crosstalk. Ryan says, RJ, bright colors represent positive energy. We live in a depressing society due to poor mental and physical health, which leads to creators gravitating towards more dark, depressing, low energy colors. Yeah, I did a video about this. I don't know if anybody remembers, probably 3 years ago. I don't remember, it could have been more, but Ryan, that's exactly, like, I talk about colors all the time, but I was talking about it in the terms of poor mental and physical health, because I was looking at and comparing an older Wolverine storyline when he was in Madripoor and being Patch, and then I was comparing it with, I don't remember the book. It was one of the X-Men, I don't know what it's called, X-Men Legacy maybe, where they were doing a story at the same time, and they were going back to that time and showing Wolverine as Patch and in this setting. And I was looking at the two different comics and going, there's something extremely different about this, about what's being presented, and not just in the story itself, but in the art. And I figured out that the difference within the art was the fact that the people that were being drawn in the new book looked hunched over and lifeless, and they didn't look like the characters within the older 80s books. And why? Because I think that in the older 80s books, you at the very least get people who are, I don't know, just artists who were aware of how a person who is healthy both mentally and physically would hold themselves. Whereas you have people today, and especially the artists that are working on things for Marvel and DC, and they don't know anything but a friend group and people around them who are in poor mental and physical health, and that's how they draw people. They draw them as the people around them, and they just look sad and depressed and unhealthy, both mentally and physically. So, it's part of their mindset, and I don't think you can actually train that out of them in a way that's going to make them good artists, unless you actually make them, mentally and physically healthy and get them to see that. So it's a really good point, Ryan. Let's see. Zach Dan says, the undercurrent of nihilism creeps into media and creates a feedback loop. Indeed it does, Zach Dan. That's exactly what it is. Let's see. George says he hates that they nerfed Doomsday. How did they nerf Doomsday? I don't even remember. Like, I haven't been following comics. I remember I was working at a comic shop when Doomsday killed Superman, but I don't know everything that's happened since then with Doomsday. Let's see. Vaz says, I think Marvel Civil War is probably a tipping point for showing superheroes on a darker side. I don't like that change Same for Project OMAC that Batman unleashed on the DC universe. Yeah, I would agree with the Civil War. I didn't really follow Project OMAC, but what I know of the story and the few books that I did read, I would agree with it as well. And there was something similar to it within Marvel Comics, I think probably in the 90s. And it was the fact that, okay, you have Batman with Project OMAC basically saying, how in the world can I defeat all of the superheroes? I need to find a way to kill each one of them in order for, if I remember correctly, the storyline was, in order for me to ensure the safety of the entire world, I have to have a database of how do I kill each one of them if I need to. But there was a similar storyline like that in X-Men back in the, again, might be late 80s, but I think it was probably early 90s, where Professor X basically had a database with Cerebro of how to kill everybody. And he had to come up with it in case one of his members went rogue, or even other superheroes went rogue. And he would, he has these files basically saying that in order to kill Wolverine, you would have to basically remove his head and make sure that it wasn't anywhere near his body, things like that. But it still didn't have the darkness of OMAC, that Batman and OMAC story. It didn't have that darkness. It was something that was a last resort, which he should not have done. And I really don't think you got that sense at the end of the OMAC storyline with Batman. But again, I didn't read the entire thing. Scrolling down. George says, I mean, when he was first introduced, let's see, who's he talking about? I'm not entirely sure. Let's see, George. I'll have to scroll up a little bit, see who George. Oh, Doomsday. He says, I mean, when he was first introduced, he not only semi-killed Superman, but nearly killed the entire Justice League when he was first introduced. Now he gets defeated by Crimson Fox. Seriously? By Crimson Fox? Yeah, I'm with you then, George. Shake my head at that. Let's see. Vaz also makes a good point saying, and Tom King breaking every superhero he touches. Yeah. Breaks their spirit, basically, so that you can't get any inspiration from them because they're not inspirational, because they themselves have a broken spirit. Let's see. George says, Marvel is stupid. They broke up Spider-Man and MJ, got a divorce, and they ruined Fantastic Four and X-Men because they don't have the movie rights. Yeah. Again, yeah, they destroyed One More Day destroyed Spider-Man as a superhero in my eyes. Like this, there is no Spider-Man that is heroic after that, because I like, again, did an entire video about this saying he's a married man. I'm sorry, but he doesn't have, as much as he might love his mother or his mother like figure, which is Aunt May, he didn't swear an oath, to love, honor, and protect her like he swore to Mary Jane. So you value your marriage above your mother figure, or even your mother. I'm sorry, you do. And if you can't see that, if you can't see how your swearing of an oath to protect this woman that is your wife is part of honor and virtue, then I don't see you having I don't see that character as having a future as a hero. Yeah, and they also ruined Fantastic Four with the whole reason that they didn't have the movie rights to it. You are correct. Let's see. Zach Dan also says, Peter Parker was never allowed to be happy for long. At least that is my impression. Not that I agree with it. Yeah, that's exactly why One More Day exists. He wanted to bring him back to, he can't be happy. He needs to be miserable. But I think they missed the entire point of the reason why Peter Parker was miserable. Peter Parker was miserable because he was always coming back from that misery and fighting against it and pushing it back in his life. And that's inspirational, and they missed the whole inspirational part of that. Elijah is here. He says, RJ, I have to be honest. The problem that needs to be discussed is people who seem to be on our side giving wokeness a second life by reviving and keep talking about it, even though they know it sucks. Agreed. But at the same time, I agree. It's a knife edge, though, Elijah. You have to keep it in people's minds to make them understand. Unfortunately, people have such thin attention spans in our society that they need to realize just how evil something is, quite honestly, because I remember back to the 1990s, right? Early 1990s when like the Berlin Wall fell. Before that time, communism, that was the evil empire. Nobody looked on communists as anything but evil, and I still to this day still don't. I mean, it is an evil ideology. Communism is. But within the span of a decade of people forgetting about it and not hearing it on the news every day, they're like, oh, I guess that communism wasn't so bad after all. And then we get into the 2000s and people are like saying, oh, yeah, I'm a communist. I'm going, you do realize you just stated you're evil, right? I shake my head. Like the whole point of why I'm saying that is because you have to remind people of the fact that no, this was wrong. It was wrong for a reason, and the reason why it died out in our society is because it was wrong. And you don't want to harp on it too much and try to bring it back to life, but at the same time, you got to remind people of these things because if otherwise you don't, they're going to forget fairly quickly about the evils that are produced by evil ideologies. Let's see. Jewel has a very good statement here. It says, go other places than Marvel, you mean. DC still has good stuff. Okay. Again, the new stuff that they're putting out from DC, the dark stuff that I just saw on Twitter, it has no point to it that I would go to a comic shop and say I'm going to specifically get this, and at this point, I would have to do that. And it's like, I got to seek this out and get it. I'm going to see it online and I want to seek it out and get it. That's what you need to do to sell a book these days. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see. Question mark, it's here. How you doing? And says, do you have any favorite indie comic creators? Mike Mignola's Hellboy, David Peterson's Mouse Guard being two examples. Let me see. I wouldn't call these indie so much because I think it was a Marvel book when it came out, although it was like an imprint book, so I don't even think it had the Marvel title on it, but it could have been DC. I'm not entirely sure. But Farfel, I always call him Farfel, but Farfel and the Grey Mouser, done by Mike Mignola, was like one of the top books of all time for miniseries, if you ask me. It doesn't have anything to do with any continuity within the whatever company it was, Marvel or DC, that it came out in. But at the same time, so it was very, very much like an independent book. I think that was probably the best independent book that I could ever think to put my finger on. I loved his art in that. It was so beautiful that I remember redrawing some of his panels when I was young, because that's what I did when I was young. So for me, that if you're looking for that kind of thing, that's what I would say. Let's see. Scrolling down. George says, I can't believe there has been 4 Hellboy movies, but then again, there have been 5. There have been 5 Crow movies, really? Okay, I did not realize that. I knew there was at least 2 or 3. I didn't realize there was 5. Scrolling down. George also says, I can't believe they even made a Faust movie. It was on the Sci-Fi Channel, and that that play, I think a typo there, plays the evil genie in the Wishmaster movie, played M. Okay. You're outside of my wheelhouse there, George. Let's see. Tony is here. Tony says, I dipped out of Marvel during Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's X-Men run. Yeah, I dipped out before that. Let's see. Tony says, and he left DC right after New 52. Let's see. EIC, Editor-in-Chief. Thank you very much, Jewel. Yeah, good. Joe Quesada is, again, if you have not seen my videos, which are about 5 to 6 years, about 4 to 5 years old at this time, about patient zero for the death of comics. Patient zero was Joe Quesada. Patient Zero was him going out and finding Son Amonat deliberately to change the way comics were made. Yeah, I lay everything at his feet as to the death of comics. He is Patient Zero for the woke mind virus and everything else that is wrong with comics today. There are plenty of roots that he has, people feeding into his choice to do that. There are plenty of people before that who were sucking the life out of comics and giving life to that evil tree that he was building. But he's Patient Zero. Scrolling down. Let's see. Immigration is a problem, but so are the movie studios and the colleges, basically the places that are overly artificial. I'm not entirely sure I know where that question or that comment is coming from. So I'll move down to see if there are any else for me. Let's see, scrolling down. Vaz. George says, I went to my LCS today and forgot it was MLK on Monday, so comics didn't come out till tomorrow, and noticed that they reprinted classic comics with original ads and they were selling out. Yeah. I would say just go. Honestly, I would much rather, for me anyways, I know I'm odd, but I would go to a comic store and spend an hour finding the book and then actually buying it for, $20 than paying the, $250 or whatever it is that they want for the reprint. That's just me. But it's a good thing that they're doing that, because I think reprints is where the lifeblood of comics comes from. I don't know if that makes any sense, but if you look at Marvel, or before it was Marvel and other comic companies that actually survived and became something over the years for comic history, they all began with trying to reprint older stories. And then once their brand was recognizable, their name was recognizable, then they moved into creating slowly their own stories. So maybe if we go back to that, perhaps there might be a future for comics in some form. Let's see. Tony says, RJ, how do you think Trump's stance on gender will affect popular culture from now on? In the short term, they will be just, I don't know, their heads will be exploding and they're just going to rip into everything that they've been spouting out in their quote unquote progressive propaganda for the last, 10 years or so. It's going to make things worse right now, but in the long term, it will make things better. Short-term pain for long-term gain, if you ask me. Let's see. Gordon is here and says, DC's not going to keep Absolute going, so there's no incentive to get invested. There you go. That's what it is, the Absolute books. I think that's what I was looking at on Twitter today. Vaz also says, Superman Absolute is not fun at all. Yeah, I can imagine. Let's see. Scrolling down. Farfar? I don't know how to pronounce his name. John always pronounces his name different. I always thought it was basically a Celtic name, so it would have a different pronunciation. I always thought it was Farfel and the Grey Mouser. But yeah, it was epic for Marvel. Thank you very much, Gordon. I remember when I was going through my comics, probably, 5 years ago, and I ran across the book and I took it out because I just love reading it over and over again. But I looked at it and went, is this in the right place? Because I separate all my books, one according to alphabetical. That's how I put them. But I also have by company. So my long boxes are Marvel and then DC and then Independence by their company names, and then they go alphabetical. So yes, I realize that I'm a crazy person, but anyway, and I was looking at it going, is this Marvel? I had it in with the Marvel, and I was like, it took me a while to figure out whether or not it was actually Marvel. There was the Marvel symbol was nowhere to be found, but yeah, I had it in the right place. Let's see. Scrolling down. Yeah, Gordon is right. Joe Quesada sold us all out. You are correct. Let's see. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Ryan says, RJ, how much does lack of intelligence in dialogue between heroes and other characters contribute to a lack of sales? How much does lack of intelligence in dialogue between heroes and other characters contribute to lack of sales? I don't think it contributes to lack of sales initially, but in the long run, it will kill your sales and have no future. Quite honestly, because I'm looking at image books, and that's what is coming to mind when you say that, because they had spectacular art, and the artists were also doing the stories in many cases, or at the very least influencing the stories. And even if you look at stuff like Rob Liefeld's X Force, right? Same thing. There was no real intelligence within any of the storytelling or the dialogue with the characters. But Spawn itself was, and I think still is, the highest selling comic ever in comic history. So yeah, you can get good sales on crappy stories and good art, but you're not going to keep it going. You're not going to sustain an industry, certainly with that kind of storytelling. As much as I think that comics need to be a combination of writers and artists pulling in the same direction and complementing each other, I think, as a writer, anyways, that the storytelling is actually more important. It's not what's going to bring people in. It's not what's going to be the flashy store eye candy that is going to make people want to read a book, but it's going to keep people there and keep them reading a book is the story. And again, if you have non-intelligent dialogue or just ridiculous fill-in dialogue like Rob Liefeld would put in for his books, it's not going to sell in the long run. Scrolling down. Let's see. Ryan, Vaz says, I don't like Superman Absolute because it's depressive and full of extreme left thinking. Well, there you go. Greg is here. How you doing, Greg? Well, better late than never, Greg. Glad to see you here. Let's see. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Zach Den says, the most depressing Superman story I like was The Man Who Has Everything. I think it was his name. I'm not familiar with that, Zach Dan, but might have to look that up. Let's see. Yes, exactly, Vaz. The art of Superman Absolute is good, though. They should give him a better series to draw. Exactly what I said on my Twitter was, because one of the covers that they showed was from Absolute, a Superman, and I said, I got nothing against these artists. It's nice art, but these stories just don't inspire. Let's see. DFLS says, just out of curiosity, what thoughts on Nosferatu, both first and recent? I haven't seen it yet. I actually might go see it this Friday or in the next couple of weeks if it's still in my theater. But for me, I haven't got to see it yet. Let's see. Jules says, DC, good stuff. I was referring to Green Lantern and Batman, Superman, World's Finest. I would say, quite honestly, the Batman, Superman's World's Finest was okay. I wouldn't call it great. It was okay. It was better than a lot of stuff you're going to find, head and shoulders better than most of the stuff you're going to find on the shelf. I'll give it that. But, according to comic history and even, 20, 30 years ago, it's not great. It's good. Let's see. Scrolling down, Gordon says that Dark Horse reprinted Firefall and Grey Melzer recently. Good to know. I have my originals though. And honestly, it's not just an inspiration for me. I've talked to so many artists who say, yeah, that is one of the books that I keep on the corner of my desk all the time because it's so inspirational. Just as an indie book, it's so, again, it was as you say, Gordon, a Marvel epic book, but at the same time, it has much more of an indie feel to it. Let's see. Jewel also says, yes, very sad. Let's see. I think he was responding to someone else there. Scrolling down. Oop, my chat just jumped for a second, so I'm going to have to find out where I was. Scrolling down. We get to Tony's comment here. Tony says, as much as I despise Alan Moore, his Superman stories are some of the best ever written. Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow still moves me to tears. Okay. And Jewel also says, did you read Batman Superman's World's Finest? It goes back to the style of stuff from decades ago. It does, and the writer does have a good sense of the history of the characters and trying to go back to that history in order to tell those stories. I can't remember who the writer is off the top of my head, but at the same time, there was something a bit off about it. I don't know what it is. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it wasn't I have to go out and buy every issue. Let me put it that way. There are plenty of comics that I've read through the years where I've read the last issue and are just chomping at the bit to get the next one. For Batman Superman's World Finest, it was a good read. But if I miss the next issue, I don't really care. Mark Waid is the writer, Joel says. Okay, there you go. Let's see, scrolling down. I think I've actually gotten to the bottom of the chat, which is great because I've been talking for 1 hour and 1 minute, and I like to keep it at an hour. So I want to thank everyone for coming here today and listen to me ramble about inspirational comics or inspiration for comics. So I am going to leave you with the second trailer for Crom the Destroyer. It is only 45 seconds, but I'll leave it for you. The links for my books are in the description, and I want to thank everyone once again for showing up tonight. We haven't had a Making Comics Fun again for over a month, I think. So thank you for everyone. I think we got probably 33 people in the chat, and it was great to interact with everybody once again. And I will see you next week when we are going to be doing comic book team up here on my channel. We're going to have an artist who doesn't have a book yet, but with his spectacular art, I'm sure he will have a book in no time. His name is Duck Bacon, if you follow him on Twitter. And he also shows up in the chat every once in a while. So just to let you know what we're going to do next week. Anyways, thank you very much once again for everybody for showing up. And I will see you all next week, or perhaps this Saturday if you are listening to my Saturday videos. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.